Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Well, here we are again. Less than 3 weeks away from another Trump presidency. Gird your loins, friends. It's going to be a long and bumpy ride, or as long and bumpy as he allows it to be by deciding not to do something impeachable. I say that because that is what I tell folks who are like, oh, I don't know if I can live through 4 years of First of all, you have no choice in the matter. You have to. We have to somehow gird the loins and get through a Trump presidency, whether it's 4 days, 4 weeks, 4 months, 2 years, 4 years. And I posit the 2 year part because I personally believe the man will almost inevitably do something impeachable. And who knows who controls the House and the Senate after the 2026 midterms. And I'm not sitting here trying to count chickens before they hatch. I don't know who's running for what. We hardly know the makeup of the Senate campaigns that'll take place in 2026. But I do know this. I would bet the House that Donald Trump will do something that normal time politicians in normal time scenarios in Washington, D.C. would say, yeah, that's an impeachable offense. It's indisputable. It's impossible to defend, indefensible. And yet, because Republicans in his presence lack a spine, I don't foresee them actually ever seeing that water is wet, that the sky is blue, et cetera, and so on. Although this is Trump's last hurrah in politics, we assume. So maybe they foresee a future where they don't have the cloud of losing the MAGA base by defying him. And quite honestly, he and Vivek and Ilan et al. Have done a pretty good job of upsetting a lot of the MAGA base by tap dancing around the H-1B visa program in recent weeks. Anyhow, this new normal that we live in, that we've existed in, and honestly should be used to by now because it's existed for at least a decade, is the one where Donald Trump goes from sniping from the sidelines, playing couch quarterback, second-guessing everything from the sidelines to, dear God, rest in control of the levers of government, and we dare not second-guess. So on Truth Social, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, in the immediate hours after the terror attack, the domestic terror attack on Bourbon Street and Canal Street in New Orleans, Donald Trump ran to Truth Social and started dripping the tropes. With the Biden open borders policy, the driver was an American citizen, native born. Anyway, with Biden's open borders policy, I said many times during rallies and elsewhere that radical Islamic terrorism and other forms of violent crime will become so bad in America that it will become hard to even imagine or believe. Again, the alleged, I guess we can't really say alleged because he's dead. He was in the truck. He did it. There will be no trial. The terrorist was an American citizen, a former Army veteran. So Trump's Truth Social is about as baseless as can be. I mean, we can focus on radical religious terror if we'd like. I'm all for that. Let's have that conversation. He continues, that time has come, only worse than ever imagined. Joe Biden is the, all caps, worst president in the history of America, a complete and total disaster. What he and his group of election interfering, air quote, thugs have done to our country will not soon be forgotten. MAGA. I mean, there's so much wrong there. And by the way, if you deign to scan through his social media post after that, there's no correction. Nothing. No takebacks. Didn't even delete the post. Just I think that's the thing that kind of stands out the most, honestly. Not only is the post wrong on so many levels, instead of quietly slinking away and deleting the damn thing, he just leaves it there and moves on to the next thing. By the way, did I say that was the post that he he shared on Truth Social in the immediate hours after the attack? No, I was wrong. That was just 23 hours ago. As I do this show again, I'm pre-recording in the 8 a.m. hour. So that was like 9 a.m. on January 2nd. We already knew by then that the terrorist who drove through people in New Orleans was an American citizen, an Army veteran. No, the first post was just as dripping in wrongness in the wee hours of New Year's Day, where he says, our country is a disaster, a laughingstock all over the world. This is what happens when you have open borders, all caps, with weak, ineffective, and virtually non-existent leadership. The DOJ, FBI, and Democratic state and local prosecutors have not done their job. They are incompetent and corrupt, having spent all of their waking hours unlawfully attacking their political opponent, me, rather than focusing on protecting Americans from the outside and inside violent scum that has infiltrated all aspects of our government and our nation itself. Democrats should be ashamed of themselves for allowing this to happen to our country. The CIA must get involved now before it is too late. The USA is breaking down. A violent erosion of safety, national security, and democracy is taking place all across our nation. Only strengthened, powerful leadership will stop it. See you on January 20th. Make America great again. No thoughts and prayers. No condolences to the lives lost. Just that Truth Social post that, again, is just as wrong as the one he gave a day later after we all knew that the terrorist who drove through people on Bourbon Street was an American citizen and formerly in the U.S. Army. And by the way, I'm doing this show. I usually pre-record it in the 8 o'clock hour, 8 a.m. weekdays. We air at 9 and 5 p.m. on America One Radio. Also 11 p.m. at Progressive Voices via TuneIn. So wherever you're listening, thank you so much. I should say that. But he's just posting. It was post-palooza in the midnight hour last night. Just post after post after post. It's like, does anyone lack the self-awareness that, maybe I should space these out? Have you heard of Hootsuite, sir? Or, take the phone away. No. We've gone through this before. We'll go through this again. And I guess as Americans, at least we are conditioned to it. Although I would also wonder how we are going to react to it, because it would seem that about 49-ish% of the American voters seem to have forgotten just how breathtakingly exhausting living through those 4 years were. And by the way, I'll even take the 1 year of the COVID pandemic out of that equation. The 3 years beforehand were an emotional roller coaster. We let the crazy guy drive the bus. Okay, we're just kind of perilously close to the edge there, but we trust that he's driving this thing. Wait, does he not see that there's that other vehicle in that lane we're about to merge into? Yeah, I mean, it was kind of exhausting before the pandemic. And then the pandemic came and we're like, well, what do you expect to happen when you let a nincompoop who likes to armchair quarterback from the sidelines with snipes and not a whole lot of substantiation have control of the damn thing? Yeah, that's what happens. Only there's these claims that he's made that these sort of terror attacks, are Biden's fault, or the assumption that like we didn't have those. In fact, he made this claim on the campaign trail that there were no terror attacks when he was president. I'm going to read from Daniel Dale, who posted back on October 23rd of 2023. I believe this was the start or near the beginning of his presidential campaign. Remember, he had to start his campaign super early because he was getting indicted midway through the Biden presidency. And so in order to set up the ability to avoid repercussions for his crimes and convictions, he ran for president. That's why we have a second Trump presidency. I don't think he had much interest in running for president before. I don't think he had much interest in actually winning the presidency the first time. But he's made a lot of money doing it, which I think was kind of the game plan all along. And then, oops, surprise, the American voter gifted him a presidency in 2016. And oops, surprise, he won again. Only this time he knew he needed to win again because, again, being president-elect and then president means you don't have to face the piper. You don't have to pay the piper for the song you sung. Anyway, October 2023, Daniel Dale, writing, former President Donald Trump made numerous false claims in a campaign speech Monday in New Hampshire. Surprise, surprise. False falsely claimed that the United States had no terrorist attacks during his presidency. So let's scan on down to that portion of Daniel Dale's story. False claim about terrorist attacks during his presidency. While criticizing Biden for his handling of Iran and national security matters, Trump made a significant false claim about his own national security record in office, wrongly declaring that there were no terrorist attacks in the U.S. during his presidency. If you notice, all of the big problems, they all stopped, and I never talked about it during my 4 years. But look what happened. We didn't have any attacks in the United States for 4 years. That's Donald Trump in a campaign speech in New Hampshire, or at least my interpretation, my impersonation. Trump touted his ban on travel from horrendous, dangerous nations, most of which were Muslim-majority countries. Then he repeated, but we didn't have an attack for 4 years. Remember now, the New Orleans killer, born in the United States, an Army veteran. Facts first from Daniel Dale, CNN. Trump's claim that we didn't have any attack for 4 years isn't true. The claim is inaccurate even if he was referring specifically to attacks by Islamic extremists. Trump's own Justice Department alleged that a mass murder in New York City in 2017, which killed 8 people and injured others, was a terrorist attack carried out in support of ISIS. Trump repeatedly lamented this attack during his presidency. Trump's Justice Department also alleged that a 2019 attack by an extremist member of Saudi Arabia's military, which killed 3 U.S. service members and injured others at a military base in Florida, which I still believe is in the United States, was motivated by jihadist ideology and was carried out by a longtime associate of al-Qaeda. In addition, there were a variety of other terrorist attacks during Trump's presidency. Notably, Trump's Justice Department said it was a, quote, domestic terrorist attack when one of Trump's supporters mailed improvised explosive devices, IEDs, to prominent Democratic officials, CNN and other people in 2018. Oh, yeah, I remember that. We had the whole SWAT team at the CNN building here in Atlanta. Remember that? In 2019, a white supremacist, are those really terrorists though, pled guilty to multiple charges in New York, including first-degree murder in furtherance of an act of terrorism for killing a black man in March of 2017 to try to start a race war. And Trump's Justice Department, good people on both sides though, and Trump's Justice Department described a 2019 shooting massacre at a Walmart in Texas as an act of domestic terrorism. The gunman who killed 23 people was targeting Latinos. Like, I'm sitting here looking on his Truth Social account, and I don't see thoughts and prayers, condolences, lives, anything like that. Just self-glorification. And Trump was right about everything. I don't see nothing that thoughts and prayers, nothing. My heart goes out to Trump was right about everything. That's all. Just self-glorification, self-gratification. Are you ready for 4 more years of that, America? This is The Ron Show on America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn. At Ron Show ATL, that's where you find us on Blue Sky, Twitter, X, Instagram, Facebook, Threads. I keep forgetting Threads. I do keep forgetting Threads. And that's a Zuck problem. That is not a me problem. I wanted to share this because I thought it was pretty interesting that NBC News picked up on the whole Trump blaming Biden thing. By blaming Biden for the New Orleans attack, the headline reads, Trump may be setting himself up for failure. Trump pointed to Biden's policies in the aftermath of the New Orleans terrorist attack, but the president-elect risks facing similar criticism if an attack happens while he's in office. I mean, these suppositioning if is sort of silly. Terror attacks are, I said this yesterday, are kind of becoming the norm, even in our comfortable sanctity we call the United States. It's been that way since 9/11, before 9/11. Actually. And I don't think the American public is waking up to the reality that decisions made decades ago sometimes, years ago, months ago, today still, have impacts on people across the world that anger those who can get here or are here. This is the fool's gold of thinking that, being Billy Badass, military might, big bluster, doesn't have an impact on us here. And we shouldn't base our foreign policy on, well, that's going to make somebody angry. They're going to blow up a Cybertruck in front of a hotel. We shouldn't make our foreign policy decisions based on that. But we also should understand that maybe it's time to start making foreign policy decisions in respect of human life, no matter where that human life is. I could go on and on about that. Anyway, let's talk about the Trump blaming Biden part and the factually incorrect statements he made on Truth Social about open borders policy when the New Orleans driver was born in the United States. He was a Baptist. He was raised a Baptist before he converted to Islam. Did you know that? Are we going to talk about that, Donald? No, we're not going to talk about that because that's hinting at his base. We're not going to talk about the fact that he was in the military for, 10 years? We're not going to talk about that because Republicans get military support at the ballot box. We're just going to talk about the fact that he was a radical Muslim. And yes, he was radicalized. Absolutely, 1,000%. That's about the one thing he got right in the Truth Social post. And that's not me throwing shade at Islam. That is radical religious motivation that can be found from any religion. I said this yesterday. Radical religiosity is a human shortcoming, and a lot of blood's been shed throughout human history because of it. So the story from NBC News was written by Peter Nicholas, Gabe Gutierrez, and Matt Dixon. And they write, the terrorist attack that killed 14 people in New Orleans is unacceptable, inexcusable, and emblematic of a failing nation whose president ranks as the worst in history, according to President-elect Donald Trump. Having held President Joe Biden to that standard, Trump is now at risk of having his withering verdict flung back at him should a comparable attack happen on his watch, which starts in just 17 days when he takes the oath of office. They then cite Donald Trump's very words. When I said that the criminals coming in, he was here, are far worse than the criminals we have in our country. That statement was constantly refuted by Democrats and the fake news media. But it turned out to be true, he wrote on New Year's Day, hours after the man plowed into a crowd of revelers. Yet, authorities have laid out facts about the case that belie Trump's account. They've identified the suspect, Shamsuddin Jabbar, as a U.S. citizen and Army veteran who lived in Texas. Pesky facts. Representative Jim Himes of Connecticut, the top Democrat on the Intelligence Committee, said in an interview that when he asked the FBI's counterterrorism chief Thursday whether there was, quote, any foreign nexus whatsoever to the attack, the answer was no. Mass killings have grown sadly commonplace in the United States, this article continues, spanning Republican and Democratic administrations alike. The perpetrators' motivations vary, leaving elected officials groping. I don't like that word. Could we use grasping? Groping for solutions and often finding none. Trump's denunciation of Biden could boomerang if there are copycat crimes or similar tragedies when he's back in the White House and Biden is no longer around to blame. And remember, we already read from Daniel Dale at CNN, there were terror attacks here domestically when Trump was president. We have a very polarized society, and there are extremists who are prepared to use violence, and it's easy to do in America, said Bruce Riedel, a former CIA officer. You can just go buy a gun. And by the way, this guy did. The unfortunate reality of America is that violence like this is kind of the norm. It would be surprising if you had a holiday without some horrific mass casualty event, he added. Here's where I zoom in, by the way. Another question is whether Trump should have weighed in when New Orleans was on edge and authorities were still piecing together what happened and why. Part of Trump's appeal to voters is his willingness to break from protocol and simply say what he thinks, no filter. But in an instance when a criminal investigation is underway, it would have been prudent for someone with so large a megaphone to hold back, Trump critics said. Leon Panetta, a former CIA director, defense secretary, and White House chief of staff in early Democratic administrations, said in an interview, I get the sense that in some ways he is still in the campaign and still trying to stress the themes that he stressed during the campaign, whether the facts support those comments or not. Absolutely. The problem is that he's now president-elect of the United States, and you really can't use those same kind of tactics without verifying exactly what the facts are. Or here's an idea. Go back online and correct yourself or update. Nah. Panetta continues, that really is the responsibility of the president to make sure what he says to the American people is backed up by the facts. This is Donald Trump. Guy's allergic to facts. Trump's initial post claims at 10:48 a.m. Eastern Time Wednesday, shortly after Fox News reported that the suspect's truck had crossed the border into the United States 2 days earlier in Eagle Pass, Texas, a town known for its large number of border crossings during the Biden administration. Fox later corrected its report to say the truck had actually crossed the border in November with a driver who did not appear to be the suspect in the New Orleans attack. Conservatives on social media took note of the initial report, concluding that the suspect was a migrant and the lax border security might be to blame for the attack. For the rest of the day, Trump didn't post any comments related to the attack, spending time at his golf course in West Palm Beach, Florida. No thoughts, no prayers. When is tea time? Just after midnight, Trump posted again on Truth Social, but this time his criticism was more general. Our country is a disaster, a laughingstock all over the world. This is what happens when you have open borders with weak, ineffective, and virtually non-existent leadership. Remember that? DOJ, FBI, Democrat state, and local prosecutors have not done their job. At 9:08 a.m. Thursday, Trump followed up with another message, broadening his criticism of the Biden administration. The whole open borders policy, continuing on. In a statement Thursday, incoming White House Communications Director Stephen Chung defended Trump's message on immigration. President Trump rightfully highlighted that criminals crossing the border have committed some of the most heinous crimes this country has witnessed in its history, he said. It had nothing to do with New Orleans, though. That's the point. Hang tight. Let me catch my breath. This is The Ron Show on America One Radio and Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast.
Broadcasting 5 days a week to make common sense common again. This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
I mean, is that a losing battle or what? Common sense? Common? Not so sure. By the way, let me apologize. As I started doing today's show, I didn't realize I had a load of laundry in the dryer that was still rolling, and I don't know if you hear some of the clicks and pops from the dryer in the background. I literally do this show in my condo, and today Atlanta is very Atlanta-y. There are all kinds of, I don't know, there are things going on behind me in the streets, sirens, and I think there's stuff going on, maybe some landscaping along Freedom Parkway to prepare for former President Jimmy Carter's memorial services that'll be taking place here over the coming days this weekend. There's just all kinds of engine noises and landscaping equipment. It's if you hear it, I apologize. If you don't, then why am I even telling you? But there you go. Now you know that, like, literally this is not some high-dollar production with large corporate backers. I don't have any of that. I do have, folks like Lee and Calvin and other folks who have donated to the show to help propel this show to greater heights, and I thank you guys all so much for that. You can do that too, by the way. At the website would be ronshowatl.com. But that wasn't a pitch for me to, I'm just letting you know. There's like a lot of environmental noise behind me today, and if you hear it, then I apologize. I hear it, and it's driving me nuts. What else is driving me nuts is the fact that obviously we have to gird our loins and in, 17 days, swear in another 4 years of this madcap bullshit known as a Trump presidency. Like your crazy uncle who watches Fox News all the time and reacts to initially what Fox News reports and then, doesn't let the rest of the story pop out before running around and telling a bunch of untruths and misdeeds, Donald Trump heard initially that a truck being used in the New Orleans terror attack had crossed the border because, Mexico does have some vehicle manufacturing facilities, and sometimes people in Texas buy their vehicles in Mexico. Instead of letting the rest of the story come out, he jumped on the open borders. It's the open borders problem, even though the terrorist who committed the crime was an American-born citizen and a former Army veteran, raised Baptist before becoming Muslim, before converting to Islam. President Trump rightfully highlighted that criminals crossing the border have committed some of the most heinous crimes this country has witnessed in its history. That's what incoming communications director Stephen Chung said, defending his boss's message on immigration. That is a factual statement, and it is a big reason why Americans overwhelmingly voted for him. Overwhelmingly, he didn't even get 50% of the vote and gave him a massive mandate. Didn't get 50% of the vote. It's also true that radical Islamic terrorism and its warped ideology have crossed into our country. This guy was born here. See, I mean, they just can't grapple with the truth, use the truth, and speak the truth. They have to do this nuance, weavy thing. Remember, he talks about the weave. I do the weave. They just can't do it. Islamic terrorism and its warped ideology have crossed into our country and infected those looking to spread hate and violence. An ally, again, I'm reading from NBC News piece. I'll include it in the show notes, as I do. RonShowATL.com. An ally defended Trump's statements and said of the suspects in the New Orleans attack and an explosion in a Tesla Cybertruck outside the Trump International Hotel in Las Vegas. By the way, another former Army veteran who I believe both of these guys at some point in time, don't know if at the same time, were stationed at Fort Liberty. I don't know that that's any correlation. I just thought, okay, that's interesting. Anyway, another ally defending Trump. These folks, while Americans, and especially regarding New Orleans, were certainly radicalized somewhere. We're not going to talk about the radicalized white guy who blew up the Cybertruck, though. So whether it's the northern or southern border, I think this certainly bolsters his argument to put a stop to illegal crossings and go after those who may be in the country. What? The attack in New Orleans and the incident at the Las Vegas hotel have also intensified the debate surrounding Trump's choices for key national security positions. Trump's pick for Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and his selection for Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, among others, have faced scrutiny over their qualifications. The images of a pickup truck racing along a crowded Bourbon Street with a black Islamic State flag attached to the hitch were stark reminders of the importance of those jobs. A Trump transition official predicted that the attacks would help ensure those national security selections are ultimately confirmed. I'm trying to understand how either of these attacks somehow erase Pete Hegseth's transgressions, shortcomings, Tulsi Gabbard's shortcomings, misstatements, lunacy. Not sure it happens on January 20th, but the idea that folks important to our national security that President Trump nominated should be confirmed quickly was always the case, but that urgency has been increased 1,000 times after the terrorist attacks over the past few days, the official wrote to NBC News. Why is this official unnamed? If there are remaining Republican senators who still are on the fence, it's time for them to get off or hear from the American people. How gross. Are we seriously going to use these two attacks, these two terror events, to push through nominations? I'm sorry, that's just kind of gross. Am I wrong here? It doesn't make Hegseth or Gabbard stronger nominations in any way, shape, form, or fashion. If anything, if they're not going to speak out and correct Donald Trump's incorrect messaging, then it just bolsters anyone's supposition that these two are highly unqualified to handle the roles that they've been nominated for. And speaking of unqualified and ill-prepared for a job, RFK Jr., we've taken our eye off the ball there, but whew. New York Times reporting that the Biden administration is trying to do all they can to prepare us for a potential bird flu outbreak, knowing that the incoming administration is somehow going to f*** that up if they're given the chance. The headline, eyeing potential bird flu outbreak, Biden administration ramps up preparedness. The administration is committing an additional $306 million towards battling the virus and will distribute the money before President-elect Donald J. Trump takes office. This filed by Cheryl Gay Stolberg. The Biden administration in a final push to shore up the nation's pandemic preparedness. Pandemic preparedness. Isn't it nice to hear that your federal government is actually working to shore up the nation's pandemic preparedness instead of dismantling its pandemic response unit? Before President-elect Donald J. Trump takes office, announced on Thursday that it would nearly double the amount of money it was committing to ward off a potential outbreak of bird flu in humans. Federal health officials have been keeping a close eye on H5N1. That is not a visa program. A strain of avian influenza that is highly contagious and lethal to chickens and has spread to cattle. The virus has not yet demonstrated that it can spread efficiently among people. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention say that the current risk to humans remains low and that pasteurized milk products remain safe to consume. Can I just tell you, by the way, I don't touch milk. I can't do that anymore. Now, listen, if somebody bakes something with it, I've partaken in a lot of baked goods over the holidays, and I have to remind myself, it's Friday, by the way. Look at each day I wake up, I'm like, what day is it? I'm kind of in this haze where I don't know what day it is. But no, I don't touch milk. It's almond milk for me. I can't just go non-dairy all total. Like, I do avoid ice cream. I tend to avoid milkshakes because, man, World War III in the gut. Almond milk is my thing now. Cheese, though, gotta have cheese. But I just, something about milk. I don't know. There's something about it that just, the idea now kind of grosses me out. Like, really? The cow's udder? Eh. And now you've got those folks out there, these loonies. Hey, if this is you, so be it. To each their own. Raw milk? Ugh. Back to the article. I'm sorry, I digress. But should human-to-human transmission become commonplace, experts fear a pandemic that could be far more deadly than COVID-19. On Thursday, the administration said it was committing $306 million towards improving hospital preparedness, early-stage research on therapeutics, diagnostics, and vaccines. Uh-oh, not the V word. We all know how RFK feels about the V word. About $103 million of that will help maintain state and local efforts to track and test people exposed to infected animals and for outreach to livestock workers and others at high risk. The Biden administration has already spent more than $1.8 billion battling bird flu since the spring of last year. Most of that, $1.5 billion, was spent by the Federal Agriculture Department on fighting the virus among animals. The remainder, about $360 million, has been spent by the Health and Human Services Department on efforts to protect people, according to federal officials. Again, I'm reading from the New York Times. I'll have this in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. The additional funds will be distributed in the next 2 weeks. Dr. Paul Friedrich, the director of the White House Office of Pandemic Preparedness and Response Policy. We have that? That sounds wonderful. Did we have that during Trump? Anyway, that's the word of Dr. Paul Friedrich in an interview Thursday. He continues, while CDC reports that the risk to the general public is low, keeping communities healthy, safe, and informed remains a top and urgent priority. He added that the money would go toward existing programs that can work to improve preparedness, not just for bird flu, but for other pathogens as well. Thursday's announcement comes amid a growing sense of urgency around H5N1. In mid-December, the CDC confirmed the nation's first severe case of H5N1 in a southwest Louisiana patient who was exposed to sick and dead birds in a backyard flock. Nothing says southwest Louisiana like the words backyard flock. I love Louisiana. I miss my friends there. Last month, California declared a state of emergency over bird flu in dairy cows. With less than 3 weeks before President Biden leaves office, the timing of the announcement also reflects deepening concerns among senior federal health officials that the Trump administration will slash the budgets of agencies, including the CDC and the National Institutes of Health. Heaven forbid that there be another Anthony Fauci waiting in the wings. Mr. Trump has said he would disband the White House Preparedness Office. Oh, my God. That's what we did when the pre-COVID son of a bitch. Although whether he could do so is unclear because the office was created by an act of Congress. His nominee for health secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., said while he was running for president that he would, quote, give infectious disease a break for about 8 years. It's okay. Going to get through this. One senior administration official who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss the matter candidly noted that because the $306 million come from funds that have been appropriated but not spent by the Health and Human Services Department, the money cannot be rescinded regardless of any action the next administration takes to restrict the mission of health agencies. But I'm telling y'all, spend that money wisely, because $306 million in federal funding, it's a pittance. It's ramen noodles when you're really hungry. Some experts have accused the Biden administration of a lackluster bird flu response. Okay. In a report issued last month, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, a research institution, said the administration, quote, continues to fall short in its management of the threat and needed to, quote, get serious about H5N1 by engaging governors, state and local leaders, and U.S. industry in the response. This is long overdue, said J. Stephen Morrison, director of the research group's Global Health Center, adding that it was, quote, going to be very welcome news to a health security community in America and outside of America that are increasingly alarmed by how sluggish the response to H5N1 has been in America. He said the money was a signal, quote, that they realize that they need to bolster the efforts on H5N1 because we've now entered a much different phase with the Louisiana case. Since the first case of H5N1 was confirmed in cattle last spring, the White House has met regularly with officials from the Agriculture Department and the Health and Human Services Department, as well as with industry Representatives. Dr. Friedrich said those meetings were now taking place twice a week. In addition to funding the development of mRNA vaccines, he said, the V word again, the Biden administration has established a national milk testing strategy and mandated testing of dairy cows moving across state lines. It is also awarded $176 million to Moderna, a major maker of coronavirus vaccines, to develop a similar vaccine using mRNA technology against H5N1. Operation Warp Speed, anyone? The CDC has also ramped up testing and surveillance of the pathogen and has contracted with commercial manufacturers to make diagnostic tests. Dr. Nirav D. Shah, Principal Deputy Director of the CDC, in an interview Thursday said about 200 CDC scientists were currently working on bird flu. I don't know. I mean, listen, sluggish response, delayed response. I'm happy that we even have a response. Bowing to what we went through when we were caught with our pants around our ankles with the COVID-19 vaccine. Scores of people, and by the way, I'm reading this as a gift article in the New York Times. I'm not just like giving this to you through the firewall. So when I give you this link in the show notes at ronshowatl.com, understand that it is a gift link as well. Scores of people in the United States have contracted bird flu over the past year, most of them from infected cows or poultry. The overwhelming majority of the cases have been mild, which has reassured health officials. That from Dr. Shah. The case involving the Louisiana patient, however, was followed by an unsettling finding. Some of the genetic samples from the patient contained gene mutations that might help H5N1 infect people more easily. Dr. Shah said the patient remained in critical condition. Okay, just a little bit more from this article. Experts know that each time the virus infects another person, it has another opportunity to mutate in a way that might increase its capability of spreading among people. In another troubling finding, one of the mutations identified in the Louisiana patient also turned up in a viral sample taken from a teenager with a severe case of bird flu in British Columbia. That's our concern. The more shots on goal that we give the virus, the greater chance of there being a mutation of some sort that precipitates a much larger situation, said Dr. Shah. But we're also equally interested in the scientific finding that thus far in the current outbreak, cases have been milder than what we've seen historically. He said there are a few hypotheses about why that is, including that when dairy workers are infected by a splash of milk in the eye, gross, they get a lower dose of virus that does not lead to the severe respiratory symptoms that doctors have seen in the past. Do you trust the incoming administration to be able to handle a potential outbreak of bird flu? Knowing, again, Americans, you seem to have forgotten what the first Trump presidency was like. You have absolute amnesia about all that happened, and this is before COVID, but you definitely seem to have forgotten what happened when the Trump administration had to respond to the COVID-19 outbreak. All the calamity that ensued. Pay attention now, because they're coming back, and bird flu is here. Back after this, The Ron Show on America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn, or wherever you podcast. All right, final few minutes of today's Ron Show, and for the week. I know, a whole week, right? How many of these shows did I do this week? I don't even know. 2, 3? 3. This is the third one. See, these holiday short weeks and middle of the week holidays, we're all just like wandering around bloated with cheese and sweets and unsure what day it is. Anyway, I want to end on something of a sports note because I see a kid getting skewered on social media and I immediately get a little defensive. I'm a Georgia Bulldog fan, and last night was not a good night for my beloved Bulldogs. They got their asses handed to them by Notre Dame. And congrats to Notre Dame, you know. They're the team that made the fewer mistakes. They came away prevailing. One of the mistakes made was a penalty called by a player who wasn't even dressed out to play, did not get to play, wasn't technically on the field to play, and yet he still got penalized. Let me give you some of the audio from what happened here.
ETN, the running back, play action fake by Stockton. Arian Smith behind the defender. He is one of the fastest men in college football, and they caught him. Xavier Watts got him at the 11-yard line, and then a late flag thrown by the side judge.
That late flag thrown by that side judge was for an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. One of the players who, again, wasn't dressed out to play, he had slacks on and a jersey on top, was running along the sideline and actually running along it. He was just kind of leaning into, there's the whole white area of the sideline of the football field that is meant for officials to be able to run down, to stay within near proximity of the field of play, especially if there is action going on along the sideline, for the officials to be safe and run down the field. And number 39, Parker Jones, who, again, did not dress out, was near enough that his arms or his shoulders or his upper body was kind of leaning over. But you can look at this, he wasn't really touching the white. He was just near it, adjacent. And the official ran into him. They kind of brushed each other. Really, I'm not trying to minimize this. It really, the official didn't get knocked over. Nobody fell down or anything like that. It could have been a sideline warning. I think it should have been a sideline warning. Nonetheless, ESPN spent time focusing on this poor guy.
And you saw at the end, the side judge collided with somebody on the Georgia sidelines and reached for his side. And then as he marked the ball out of bounds, he threw a flag. It's J.B. Garza. And they're assessing a penalty against Georgia.
Okay, that's fine. But 15 yards. I mean, the ball went from inside the 15-yard line way back to about the 25.
Let's look as the official running down, and number 39 runs right into the official, which slows him down. That's who ultimately calls the penalty. You have to stay out of that white part. That is the official's area. They own that white part of the sideline. Usually have a get-back coach, and that time a big 15-yard penalty.
And then the folks at ESPN, who, by the way, I thought did a fantastic job with the broadcast. I'm not sitting here, skewering ESPN, but they went back to sort of try and feel bad for the kid, but they also kept putting him on TV.
That must be the worst feeling in the world for Jones.
Move on.
Obviously not intending to interfere with the officials, just caught up in the excitement.
There he is. We're looking at him.
Just wrong place, wrong time. I feel bad for that young man. He didn't do anything malicious. He was just in the way as the official was trying to run down, and makes it very tough.
Okay, but stop fixating on him. There's a game, and here's the other thing. I'm talking, this is to the UGA. By the way, Parker, after you do that, know that you could be on TV and don't pick your nose. I bet you his mom said that. Parker! No, I guess my point is, after the fact, and by the way, that is not like the one play that cost UGA the game or anything like that. But I do have to, caution my Bulldog fan, faithful friends and whatnot. Listen, how about we don't demonize the kid? I personally think that they should have been given a sideline warning instead of a 15-yard penalty, because it was so iffy. Like, it was kind of, I don't know. I think they should have been given a warning, and that's usually what happens. He's just a kid. That one play didn't cost Georgia the game, and I think maybe Georgia fans should maybe spend more time lifting him up versus tearing him down, so that the folks who are out there recruiting other players can point to our fan base being a loving and supportive fan base. Anyway, thanks for coming to my dog talk. And for the rest of you who are like, I thought this was a political podcast. Yeah, it normally is. It's just that every once in a while, I think it's good to talk about some other things that show that we, can have our empathy and compassion directed to other facets of society as well. No, but seriously, there were folks all over social media comparing him to remember the Bartman guy, the guy that caught the foul ball that could have been caught by a Chicago Cubs player, and it had been like 80-some years since the Cubs had won a World Series, and for some reason, that one foul ball was somehow going to be the catch that was going to propel the Cubs to a World Series win back in the early 2000s. I mean, we don't know that was going to happen. It was a playoff game against, I think, the Marlins at the time, and I think the Marlins did go on to win the World Series. Anyway, the Cubs were convinced then that one guy, that rabid fan, Chicago Cub fan, cost his beloved team and their beloved team a chance at the World Series. I don't know. And the guy had to go into hiding, and it was a nightmare. We can't do that to a college kid, right? And I get it. They're young men, but still, he's a college kid. Can we kind of let Parker Jones not live in infamy for that? It's not why Georgia lost the game. All right. We're actually heading into a weekend. I don't know if you know that. Enjoy it. Back here Monday, 9 to 10 a.m., 5 to 6 p.m. on America One Radio, 11 p.m. to midnight, Progressive Voices, wherever you tune in. Show notes at ronshowatl.com. Take care.